to Immigration Nation. I'm Mark Holthe, Canadian immigration lawyer, and we are back with one of the most amazing things to talk about that anyone could. Yes, like I said, one of the most amazing things that anyone could ever imagine. Nothing like your intro kind of not syncing well with the with what you're trying to do here. But hey, it doesn't matter what the form looks like today because the substance is going to be awesome, and we are addressing something that I don't think anyone in their wildest dreams could have ever thought would have happened. And that is a round of invitation that occurred on February the 13th, Saturday, just this past Saturday. We're recording on Tuesday, the 16th, where the government, in their infinite wisdom, decided to extend a CEC-only draw to 27,332 people with the lowest score of 75. So if you're watching Immigration Nation on the YouTube channel, or Facebook or Periscope, wherever you are, all you need to do is just go to the Canadian Immigration Institute YouTube channel, and there's a ton of other videos there. I've got one on the top 5 things CEC people need to do. I've got 2 that were live streams that were just trying to unpackage this crazy world that we're now in, and then a third one that kind of hit on the high points. And so there's only so much you can do with very little notice. But then I realized, you know what? We've got to do an Immigration Nation. So I have invited my good friend and colleague, Alicia Backman-Beharry, to join me today. How are you, Alicia?
Hi, Mark. I'm well.
Good. We're all connected now. This is awesome. So what do you think about this, Alicia? What do you think about this massive draw that IRCC did?
Well, I think there is going to be a lot of people who are extremely happy about this because it's going to give them a chance they otherwise would never have had. And at the same time, I think there's a few pitfalls to watch out for because there might be people who think that they will have qualified for the CEC, but may not have realized that they actually received an invitation to apply that ultimately is never going to be successful if they don't meet some of the minimum criteria for the CEC.
Yeah. And I think you hit on a point that's really, really important. And that's the simple fact that just because you received that invitation to apply doesn't mean that you're going to get all the way through to become a permanent resident for a number of reasons. And we're going to talk about them today. But for those of you who are new to this or are wondering, what are we talking about with this whole express entry draw? I'm going to flip my screen over, Alicia, and I'm going to show people what we're referring to here. So if we go here and we take a look at the rounds of invitations, and you can Google it yourself at home, you will see that over the past while, well, let me just show a little bit of a historical breakdown here just before we jump into this so people can put this into context. Like whether it's the news or someone who's unfamiliar with this that is just checking out this video for the first time. If you look here, you'll see this is the breakdown, and this is the best view to show. Literally, it's the best view to show because it shows the numbers of invitations issued here. And you can see going back for the longest time, all they ever issued was right around 3,500. You know, for the Canadian Experience class, 3,500. Then we started to climb up a little bit. They started to realize back in 2020 that they needed to start extending larger nominations to bring in more people. And you can see CEC was still around 3,000. The no program specific draws, which included everybody outside of Canada, was 3,900. And then you can see it slowly starts to increase. And then we thought it was crazy. At the end of last year, they issued 4,000 or 5,000 draws in a row, which started to push the scores down marginally because there's so many people who want to immigrate to Canada. They started to push these down marginally all the way down to 468, which was the lowest for basically in a long, long time. And then in the new year, they did a provincial nominee program draw. Then they did a CEC, which was 4,750, which took the scores down to 461. Then they followed that same pattern, provincial nominee, and then CEC, and then it dropped it to 454. And you can see 4,000. So they're right around that range. And then the absolute unthinkable happened. There was a provincial nominee draw on the 10th, and then Saturday, I don't know how many they've ever done on Saturdays. It was like they wanted everybody to not be working and to pay attention to what just happened. 27,332 with the lowest ranked candidate 75. So, Alicia, what is this? Is this something that we're going to see over and over again? Is it, as we entitle this, is this the best of times, or is this what we'd call the worst of times? What do you think?
Well, hopefully it's the best of times for the majority of people, because this is an opportunity that, who knows, may or may not ever come again, right? So I have had clients already reaching out saying, well, what do I do? You know, I was in a provincial nominee pool and now I got an invitation to apply under this CEC draw. Do I switch gears? Or there's people outside of Canada who may have worked in Canada for a while and are wondering, uh-oh, does that work actually qualify? So for some people, and hopefully most people, it's going to be the best of times, and this is going to be their opportunity.
Okay. All right. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to flip my screen back and we're going to explain something to the viewers. Those of you who have received your invitation to apply, many of you I know were totally unprepared for this, right? Some of you are represented by counsel or another representative, a consultant, and you may or may not know really where you stand. So lots of times people put profiles in for a number of reasons. You know, in some cases, you're not even sure if you can fully prove what you have in that profile. But what we want to talk about today is the essential components of the Canadian Experience class. Really, that's where we're going to start with, so that you can know for certain what the expectations are and what that standard is that you have to meet in order to really prove that you meet the eligibility threshold. All right, so why don't we jump over there, and Alicia, I'll have you chat with, kind of lead with this as well. Let me flip over to this one, wrong one. There we go. That's the one I'm looking for. So right here, what we're looking at is the regulations, the Immigration and Refugee Protection Regulations. And this is section 87.1, which is, of course, the Canadian Experience class here. So, so where would you like to start, Alicia? Like, I think, you know, this gets a little technical, but it's important for us to, you know, to really dive into this and show people the source of eligibility so that they understand.
Absolutely. So I always start off by telling clients that there are two different things that they have to meet. So one are the minimum eligibility requirements, and that's where it's set out in 87.1 sub 1 of the Immigration Refugee Protection Regulations. Everybody's got to meet this in order to qualify for the minimum eligibility. If you don't meet this, it doesn't matter what your CRS score is, you're not going to qualify. And some people are only looking at that comprehensive ranking score, and that's a mistake, because you can get your application refused instantly or after months and months after you've put it in and done a lot of work if you don't meet these minimum eligibility requirements of the class. So that's what 87.1 sub 1 is all about.
And I'll also add that people need to understand that they need to meet these minimum entry criteria all the way up to the point in which they submit their application. So even with an ITA, some things are locked in, like your age, but not everything. So especially people that may have accumulated their work history, and we'll get into this in a little bit, over a larger stretch of time. And maybe the work experience that you are, maybe the work experience that you're trying to claim is actually stretching into the end part of that 3-year window that you're trying to work with. And so you have to be aware of that all the way up until you actually submit your EAPR, sometimes you have to rush to get things if documents and other factors, you know, that go into your eligibility are going to be impacted by time. So one of the things I'll point out here, Alicia, is this is why right here, this statement, which many people don't pay attention to, this is why if you've received an invitation to apply and you're currently living in Quebec, this is potentially going to be a large issue for you. So an intention, you need to demonstrate an intention to reside in a province other than the province of Quebec. And so that's right off the bat, people need to understand that. And if you're currently living and working in Quebec and you've got your invitation to apply, well, then I think you need to get some help from an immigration lawyer to give you some guidance on what you need to do to make sure you're not falling afoul of this particular provision.
Absolutely. And there's a few things that go into what a person's intention to reside in a province might be, or how you prove what it would be.
Yes. Okay, so let's talk about how you actually become a member of this class. So,
All right. So just as you were saying, Mark, they're looking at the 3 years before the date on which the application is made. And that's absolutely essential because um, at, because of COVID, many people have lost their jobs in Canada. And if your qualifying work experience is getting older and older now by the time you've received this invitation to apply, it's really important that you can prove within the 3 years before you make your application that you have at least 1 year of full-time work experience or the equivalent in part-time work experience. And it has to be a high-skilled job. And by high-skilled, we're talking about the National Occupation Classification, and it's skill level 0, A, or B. And there's certain restricted occupations that don't qualify. So we can get into more of the details, but that's kind of the broad category for one of the main requirements of the minimum eligibility criteria. The
and
next thing
B
is
and
that,
C.
yeah,
Yes.
the next thing relates to that as well. So when you're talking about that 1 year of qualifying work experience, the job that you're doing, the knock that you pick and that you put in your profile is absolutely essential. So it's the onus on the applicant to show that they did, in that 1 year, the actions described in the lead statement of the occupation. And a lot of people miss this because if you're looking at that knock classification code, there's a little paragraph at the top, and that's the lead statement. And then there's all the main duties. And some people only talk about the main duties in their reference letters, but make sure that you're covering, that you're performing the lead statement actions as well as, and this is sub C, a substantial number of the main duties that are set out in that knock.
Okay.
And there,
What
there's a
would you,
little bit of a,
Alicia,
yep,
what would you define substantial as? Like if you were to
yeah.
assign a percentage, what would you assign to mean substantial?
So to be safe, we usually go with 75%, right? It's more than half. It might not be absolutely every single one of those main bullet points that are listed as required, but it's probably around 75% of those.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
All right. Okay. Now some other factors here.
yeah. So the other factors are making sure that you've had your language assessed, and there are required tests that you would have to take. Make sure that it's IELTS General or CELPIP General and not the academic, because you can be refused if you don't do the right language test. Or if it's French, then you've got your French language tests. But all of those French language or English language test results also can't have expired. And I think, Mark, you did another video just yesterday about
Mhm.
making sure your documents haven't expired. So that's
Yeah.
key as well.
And can you imagine right now, and I'll just flip back here to us, but can you imagine how many people are going to need to, to either like their language is expiring like right away, or they have not obtained an immigration medical because they never anticipated it, or they need the police certificates from India and everybody is going to be reaching out to the consulates to request them, and you have 90 days to get all of this done. Can you imagine what this free for all is going to be? So one of the bonuses of watching this with us is we're telling you, book your medical immediately. Do not wait. Do not hesitate. Get it done immediately. So that's
Yeah,
something absolutely people need to pay attention to.
yeah, for sure.
Okay. All right. So let's continue down here a little bit more. So proficiency with the language, absolutely. And then really, I think for the most part, part E is pretty straightforward here. So there's not a whole lot we can pull out of there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So sub
Go
three
ahead.
is important though. Yeah. So now it's talking about, what qualifies as that qualifying 1 year of work experience in Canada for the CEC. And so sub 3, sub A says any period of employment when that foreign national was engaged in full-time study will not be included in calculating that period of work experience. So if somebody came as a student, they're on a study permit to Canada, in most circumstances, they have the ability to work part-time during the school year and full-time during school breaks, but that doesn't qualify for CEC in terms of this minimum 1 year qualifying work experience. As soon as they graduate, then they're allowed, usually, as long as they've applied properly for their postgrad work permit, to work full-time. And if they have that postgrad work permit and it's an open work permit, that's okay. But time when they're full-time students will not qualify.
Yeah. And then B.
And then B, so self-employment does not count. So if you had your own business, it doesn't count for the CEC in Canada. If you had any period of unauthorized work, and so that means your work permit lapsed and you didn't restore it or renew it in time, you didn't apply for an extension in time, and you had unauthorized or illegal work, that doesn't qualify. So any period of unauthorized work is not counted towards your qualifying 1 year of Canadian work experience. The next one, sub C. So you must have had temporary resident status during your period of work experience. So temporary resident status, um, well, it usually is visitors, but it's not going to count for work experience if you're not authorized to work. So in this case, basically you need to have a work permit
Yeah.
and you
This is
can have
important.
implied status.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is important here. One of the things too, like I always wondered, okay, it already says here that you can't be without status, right? That you work without a work permit essentially. So
Yeah.
so where's the confusion here? What are they getting at? And
Well,
I ran into this situation with a client about a year and a half ago, and this is something that we may very well see a lot of people falling into this situation. And that
mhm,
situation is if they're not in Canada, but they're working for a Canadian company remotely.
remotely. Yeah.
And so
And the
this
other
person
the
was
other
trying to
circumstance.
claim, oh, go ahead, Alicia. Yeah.
I was just going to say the other circumstance where temporary resident status, making sure that you have the ability to work could apply is if you have a TRP. And that's more unusual, but a temporary residence permit or what used to be called a minister's permit would make somebody eligible here. However, if you've got a refugee claim in process and you've got a work permit through that refugee claim, that doesn't count either.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. I know in the situation of my client, he'd actually claimed 50 points for Canadian work experience and received an ITA. And there will be some out there like this that got the extra 50 points because they had they'd indicated that they had a job offer in Canada. They were working for a Canadian company. They provided the job offer letter, and all of that, resulted in them getting an invitation to apply. Now, the interesting thing right now, Alicia, is because of A11.2 and that assessment that they do, eligibility, one of the factors that they'll look at is, do you have the minimum level for the round of invitations at the time in which we assess your application? And at 75, pretty much everybody, whether they have those job offer points or not, are still going to be well above essentially the pass mark. So that is not something that is going to be as big of an issue, but there's still complexities all throughout these applications that are going to cause people problems when it comes to, like we've talked about here, the factors that immigration is looking for. So we've had a chance now to kind of go over the boring, dry legislative stuff. So, like, realistically, like if you were to have a Canadian experience class person come in that has an ITA, and they come in and say, "Hey, Mark, can you help us? Or hey, Alicia, can you represent me going forward to submit my application? I want to make sure everything's correct." Where would you start with them? So what would be the first kind of thing that you would address with them in that situation?
So normally I want to see their valid work permits. I want to make sure that when they're looking at their work experience, they've properly calculated the year of work experience in Canada, the Canadian work experience, and then also how many years of overall work experience did they claim in Canada and foreign work experience. And it seems like it might be easy, but it becomes really complex because people's lives are not easy, right? We have a job, it starts, it stops, maybe people are laid off for COVID and they have to switch employers and switch jobs. So there's different months that will add up to periods of work. And so if somebody is put in there, because when you're doing your EE profile, it doesn't allow you to say what day of the month you are working.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to round up to what month. And because of that, people might actually be getting those invitations to apply early, right? They might be getting credit for work that they've put in a period of work. And honestly, they put that period of work in, but they didn't realize that the system rounds up. So, one of the things that we always go through with our clients is, do you actually have the number of years that you're claiming?
And with this, I think a lot of people know now that we have our step-by-step course, the Express Entry step-by-step course that we offer, that is chock full of every single component of the Express Entry process, including a bunch of tools and resources that we created to help people sort through this stuff. And one of the things that Alicia helped to create for the course was what we call our CEC Hours of Work tool. And when people are trying to figure out how in the world can I properly represent my work history to an officer in a way that they're going to get it? Because remember, outside of Canada, you have to demonstrate, at least for the first year of eligibility, continuous full-time employment. But for the Canadian Experience class, that first year, you don't have to do that. So it can be kind of parceled together by bits and pieces of work over a 3-year stretch, literally. And there's going to be a lot of the people that received invitations this round that had periods of layoff because of COVID. And so this is a tool that we've created. And I'm going to flip over and share my screen here. Alicia, this time I'm going to have you kind of take over a little bit in talking about what we have here. And like I said, this little tool that we've created is available to those who subscribe to our course. And this course is also, it's also kind of augmented by a 2-week long masterclass that I personally host in a private Facebook group where we talk about everything in detail, and also any of the gaps that might be, within the course materials. And there's over 56 individual lessons full of these little tools like this one that Alicia created. And there's a Q&A that we do every morning, and we'll see if it's going to be morning. With everybody being in Canada now and everybody working, we may shift the course that starts on February the 22nd to maybe 5 o'clock in the evening. We'll see. Depends on what's going to work best for really this massive 27,000 cohort of people that are piling in and registering for the course. And you can just click on the link below to do that. But Alicia, so we've got a little bit of an introduction here that we give to our clients, which to a large extent talks about the things that you've already talked about, some tips and strategies. But did you want to go right to the heart? And we even have outlined with everybody once again what the eligibility definitions are. But this is where the rubber hits the road. Tons of stuff here. Tons we've talked about. Was there any of this part that you wanted to address, or do you want to jump right into how we calculate?
Yeah, maybe scroll up for a sec, Mark, just back to
Yep.
that first page. One of the things that's really important is to gather the evidence of your work experience that you're claiming. So some people have great employers that are able to provide them a full letter as well as their timesheets and their tax documentation. But some people have employers where they can't actually get a letter from their employer. And so gathering all the evidence that you have, your pay stubs, your timesheets, if you've got your ROE and your tax filings, the employment contract itself, sometimes it's in an email or a letter, sometimes it's actually a signed contract, then all those things are important to gather to prove your periods of work experience. And if you're looking at cobbling together different time periods over the year or the years, then it's really important to be carefully keeping those records, finding those records to be able to fill in this tool. So if you
Excellent.
scroll down a little bit, Mark,
Yeah.
the way we do it usually is in reverse chronological order. So when you're filling out your Express Entry profile, you'll want to put everything that's happened most recently into backwards into the furthest in time. So it's just easy to keep track of it if you do it in reverse chronological order. But again, we're looking at, do you actually qualify? Do you have that 1 year of skilled work experience inside Canada? And that means that you're actually working in Canada. You can't be
Yeah.
working remotely, as we talked about.
Here's a
So
here's a
yes.
here's a challenging situation, Alicia. So often I'll get a client who will tell me, we'll just flip back here. They will tell me, well, I had a vacation, and so I was on I had a 1 month, unpaid vacation back to the Philippines for a month, and can't I just claim that? Immigration says that that I can kind of round my hours and my time, and I've heard people say that you can count vacations. Well, can I count that towards my work history if I've got exactly kind of 1 year? And then I've got 1 month within that year period away. Like, what do you think about that? There's lots of different schools of thought on that. And remember,
Well,
this one is unpaid. So we'll say it's unpaid.
yeah. And so the difficulty is the unpaid. And so immigration clearly says it's got to be paid work. It's got to be wages or commission, and you have to have paid experience. So the problem is that unpaid break. And I know immigration's attitude in terms of mat leave, if you've been on mat leave, that's they take that as unpaid and they say that doesn't qualify. So I think you're running the risk of saying that month of unpaid work is going to be subtracted from your year, your 1,560 hours, or your 12 months of full-time work. And that's the conservative view. And so
Yeah.
if you want to be safe, then probably taking the conservative view is the way to go.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, let's jump back here again and let's continue on. All right, so we have so we've gone over the requirements, the basic requirements, which we talked, and we actually showed people the actual law as opposed to the government website where they the program delivery instructions and what they present to the general populace if you search for CEC eligibility. But let's continue on down here, and we've got some do's and things that are not, that won't work. And so we've got some examples just to help you there. Is there anything that you want to say about the nots, the do nots?
I guess, yeah, just that one check mark at the top there. As long as you have that one full year, if you happen to be laid off at the time that on February 13th when you got this invitation to apply, you can still apply. You're still fine as long as you have that 1 year of qualifying work experience within the previous 3 years. So you don't actually actively currently need to be employed as long as you have that 1 year within the last 3 years.
Yeah. And yeah, that's especially individuals. And, you know, the government confirmed, I think it was today, they provided a rationale for this massive draw that they provided. And they did indicate that, I can't remember if it was 90 or 95% of the people were in Canada, which meant that there was a small portion that are actually outside Canada. And so, yeah, so that's definitely a factor that you take into consideration. If you're not in Canada, but you accumulated that 1 year before you left in the three, you're still fine. You're still
Or
okay.
or even if, yeah, even if you're in Canada and you just happen to have lost your job.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that was actually one of the things that came up this past, just today. I had two interviews with national newspapers on this exact topic. And that was one of the things that was brought up was, well, what about individuals that are, you know, not currently working? You know, they're being given an opportunity for permanent residence. And we talked a little bit about the pros and cons of that. I'm definitely a proponent to rewarding people that are here in Canada who've been just really slugging it out during the hardest of times. And you think about, really, for these individuals, you think about the sacrifices that so many people have made and how the uncertainty was for postgrad work permit students who maybe only had a 1 year work permit. And when they were laid off, that basically killed their opportunity to qualify for the CEC until this more recent announcement from the government, which full props to IRCC, you know, to grant an extension of 18 months to allow those postgrad students to get through. And then I even remember recently we provided various members of our immigration section with the Canadian Bar Association and us table officers. We provided the minister with some thoughts that we had informally put together and presented to him for transitioning temporary residents to permanent residents. And never did we, it was number 2 on the list, was reducing the score for the Canadian, you know, for the rounds of invitations, to reduce it for sure, to scoop up more people. But when people have sacrificed and made all of these efforts, you know, and for the government to decide, well, we'll just invite them all, like, wow, like that is pretty crazy. That's pretty amazing. So we'll see what the ripple effects are, and there's lots more to talk about that. But yeah, full props to them. Okay, we're almost to the best part. Oh, let's get to the right one here. I'm bouncing all over the place. Here we go. Okay, so now, so we've hit on some of the news, and you know, the people who, you can kind of scroll through this if you want to pause the video or not, but this is kind of a member tool that we create for those that are in the course. But is there anything else that you want to touch on here before we get to the last page?
I think the main thing is, how do you qualify? How do you show those qualifying full-time, or the one qualifying full-time year, as a minimum eligibility requirement? And this is where there is some guidance on IRCC's program instructions, and it talks about, well, full-time, one job, that's easy. You can easily say, okay, yes, 12 months, one year, no problem, 1,560 hours. And There's not a lot of complexity to that situation. However, it also says you can do equal amounts of part-time work over a 2-year period, and that could equal 1 year. So looking into that more carefully, they give an example of 15 hours a week for 24 months, and that could equal 1 year of full-time work. And you could be working more than one job. A lot of people, if they're working part-time jobs or 2 part-time jobs, are probably working more than 15 hours a week. But conservatively, we'd like to say only count it as a half a week or only count it as 15 hours. And you can look conservatively at hours and weeks and months to try to see if you're going to reach that 1 year target.
Yeah. And that's probably one of the areas, Alicia, that I have run into more problems than any. There's statements that are really conflicting on the IRCC website where they say that you can average your hours, right? And so some people will work many, many weeks or months, maybe in a row, at 10 hours a week. And then they'll have a stretch after that that is maybe 25 hours or 28 hours, not quite full time. And then they say, well, when I add them all up and divide by whatever it might be, 12, it works out to, a year. And so we run into lots of challenges with that because immigration has never been very, very clear exactly on how to calculate these. But within our office, Holthe Immigration Law, we tend to be quite conservative in how we calculate those points. And so that's why we created the tool, basically to allow us to document the hours in a way that an officer can understand. So let's flip to the beautiful part of the whole thing, which is our work experience calculation tool here. And it's, fill in the blank kind of chart to help you track everything. But did you want to kind of touch on this and talk about it a little bit more detail?
Yeah. So start with your most current job and then work backwards in time. Have the start date, so the actual day that you started that job, and then when you actually ended. And if it's your current job, you can put present. But you're going to put your job title in your NOC because you want to make sure that you're claiming the right NOC. And then you're going to get different allocation of points for Canadian or foreign work. And so you can put whether this work was in Canada while you were authorized to work or if it was foreign work experience. In order to try to figure out conservatively, do I have that 1 year? Put down all your hours. You can go back to your timesheets usually and find the hours that you've worked per week. And then you can put down the number of weeks that you've worked. And then you can put down the number of months that you've worked. And again, this is largely because people are putting together different periods of part-time work. And so you want to make sure that when you claim your hours, so you can put down the hours and you can look at it, but conservatively, when we look at those number of weeks, give yourself credit if it's only a part-time job for only a half of a week. And then you can add up the number of months at the end. And at the end, we'll do a few calculations. We'll look at that total Canadian work experience, and then we'll compare it to whether it meets that minimum eligibility for that 1 year of Canadian work experience. And then if there's a deficiency in that minimum eligibility, then we've got a tough conversation, right? Do you decline that invitation to apply? And then the other thing, of course, is to add your total for all of your foreign work experience as well. And then people get sometimes confused about what has to be continuous. And this is where there's a difference between the minimum eligibility criteria for the CEC versus the federal skilled worker. So for CEC, remember, this doesn't have to be continuous 1 year. You can cobble together different periods for 1 year. And then we can look at foreign work experience in terms of your number of years of foreign work experience for CRS points.
And that's an important point to address too. Step one, do you meet the minimum criteria for one of the economic programs, the FSW, the CEC, the Federal Skilled Trades? Once you've met that, it's open season. So for example, for you CECers that want to claim foreign work experience, sometimes people say, well, I can't claim that because that work history was only for 8 months. And then I have another 4 months with another company. And so I can't claim that as 1 year for work experience. And that's simply not true. Once you've met the minimum criteria, which to summarize, you've worked in at least a skill level B position for 1 year in the previous 3, and you have a CLB 5, which is 5 on the CELPIP, and it's 4, and I can't remember which ability, and then 5 and all the rest on the IELTS. But it's really low. The threshold is really low for the Canadian Experience class. Once you've met that, then you can claim all these other points, for your foreign work experience. Ironically, Alicia, with where this last draw happened, it doesn't really matter anymore. 75 is so low that if you no longer can get reference letters from employers overseas, there are some strategies that you can employ to carefully remove some work history that you may have had in your profile at the EAPR stage. Now, I'm just going to say carefully, because when it's done correctly, it works. If you don't do it properly, then it can cause problems for officers adjudicating the application. So, all right. So that is, so that's the tool. Any other last little minute comments on kind of how we've got this set up?
I think it's just a matter of being really detailed, going back through all your records and making sure that you actually have that 1 year of minimum eligibility, 1 year work experience inside Canada within the previous 3 years.
Yeah, because without it, you're done. And one of the problems that we face, and you guys have been really good, and I'll just shift back here. We will get to questions. So those of you who have been here wondering, are we going to be able to ask any questions? We definitely will. We're going to flip here and answer any questions that any of you CECers out there who were drawn under this 27,332 ITAs on February the 13th. We will get to some questions, so you can start pulling those up now if you'd like. And then Alicia and I will try to answer those and help you out. But yeah, it's the most important thing people have to realize too is that there are so many other people that are in the same situation as you. People that have received an invitation, people that did not anticipate it, that were shocked when it came, that are in a position right now where they're racing to get their documents just like you. And so one of the things I want to shift to, Alicia, before we get to the questions is, and right off the bat, you talked about it was important to make sure you actually had the work history and that you qualify. So that's really maybe number 1 on my list. But I'm going to shift over here and see if I can just share this screen. We'll close that off. That was from before. But what I had on my list first was check the document expiry dates. So that's number 1. You have to make sure that your documents are not going to be expiring before you submit your EAPR. Number 2 on the list, schedule your medical. How many panel physicians are there across the country? My goodness, they're going to be overrun with people trying to schedule their medicals now. You've got 90 days to deal with this. So book it now. Do not wait. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck, with months and months before you can schedule your medical. And then the messy situation of trying to explain to IRCC that because of this overrun of people, you're simply not able to get that medical done. So pay attention to that. And then number 3 is order your police certificates. If you're from India and everybody's going through limited consulates to get updated police certificates, then you need to do that as soon as you possibly can. Now, I put police certificates there knowing that for some of you, if you've never gone back to India since you obtained your last one, you're still good. So police certificates don't expire if you have been outside of that country and you've obtained those police certificates after you left. Then they don't expire, so you're okay. But for many of you are going to be scrambling to get your first ones because you never even anticipated that you would have been drawn. And so now you're racing, and those things are outside of your control. Just like scheduling a doctor's appointment. You can't just speed it up. It's entirely dependent upon that third party, we say. And then the fourth one is to update your reference letters. And like Alicia said, it's not just a matter of making sure that you meet the eligibility. And within our course that we have, we've got tons of templates and checklists and things to help and sample documents to help you make sure that your reference letters are correct, that you're giving your employer the information they need to draft them in the proper way. And like many of you out there, when the employer just tells you, oh, can you just do it? Please, whatever you do, and I'm just going to go back to this screen, whatever you do, do not just search online for a reference letter template and then use it. Can you imagine? And let's picture an officer, and this is where they are now. They're in their homes. They are looking at a laptop screen just like I am right now. And they have opened up their screen and they've got a number of applications they're working on. And you're the third one that they've done. And the two previous to you had reference letters from the employers that looked exactly like yours in form. They looked like they were structured the same way. Now, what do you think an officer's going to think? They're going to wonder if this is legitimate or genuine. And so in our step-by-step course that we've got tools and templates. And yes, I have a reference letter template there, but it's as a guide only and not meant to be used exactly. Now, on the other hand, we also have, Alicia, and I'll just jump back here. I've got so many different little screens for us here. But like we were talking about before, there are tools that we've provided, and one of them is a letter of explanation template, both for documents and for the EAPR information. And in that case, I tell all of the people that subscribe to the course, 100% use it. There's no problem. Use it exactly as for your EAPR, your letter of explanation, as well as for everybody else. It doesn't matter, because the officer is going to look at it and they're going to say, holy crap, this is exactly what I want to see. It's laid out just perfectly how I want to see letters of explanation, and the document checklist that's associated with and the letter of explanation for your documents. We always have not a checklist, but a little outline of everything that should be included in there. And so that's something that I always encourage our people to, go ahead and use. But for the reference letters, do not do that. Okay, so I'm gonna jump over here and just continue with one last thing. And so we've got the document checklist is make sure that those documents in your EAPR document checklist, make sure that they're all valid. Schedule your medical right now, order your police certificates, update your reference letters. And then the last thing I want to point out is this: register for our course. And I know people are like, oh, seriously, Mark, come on. Like, you're promoting your course. Hell yeah, I am, because I can tell you that this thing is freaking awesome. And hey, it's Immigration Nation. I can say whatever I want, but you guys don't have time. You're working. You don't have time now to go search the internet trying to find answers that you know darn well you can't trust. And so this course that we've created, which is literally led and guided by me, there's a masterclass of 2 weeks to fill in all the gaps with those little sessions in the mornings in our private Facebook group. I would hold this up against anything that's out there. And when we are racing, trying to get things right, remember that IRCC is ruthless and cruel. And if you miss one little thing, if you have submitted a black and white copy of a German police certificate instead of a color, it will get your application returned. And what happens when it gets returned? Your dream of staying in Canada, poof, is gone. It's literally gone. Because are they going to do another crazy massive scoop of draws where the lowest candidate with 75 actually gets drawn? Are they going to do it again? Boy, I wouldn't be banking on it. That's all I have to say. So click on the link below and you can register for that course. The next one starts just next week on Monday, February the 22nd. Join me. And it's awesome. When people come in, it's just like a family. Everybody's working together. And there's going to be a ton of the February 13ers. And I'm coining that because that's what you guys are. You're the February 13ers. Okay. All right. I have blithered on enough. Now I'm going to try to figure out a way to get back to where we are, Alicia. And we're going to open this up. And I don't know if you have any other things after I was extolling the virtues of this course that I absolutely think is the greatest thing in the whole world. But did you have any other? Alicia's like, oh my goodness. Yes, I work in Mark's law firm, but he goes so crazy sometimes, and that's all right. That's okay. So these are positions held by myself personally, and not reflective of any other lawyer in our firm or the Canadian Bar Association or any other organization I'm affiliated with. So.
You know what, Mark? It's great because it shows that you really care, right? Like you spend so much of your own personal time to honestly try to help people go through this process. So kudos to you.
And I didn't pay her to say that. I didn't pay her to say that.
He didn't pay me to say that. The other thing that came up while you were talking, though, was when you're when the applicants or the CEC people who've received their ITAs are gathering all those documents, if you've applied for your entire family, then you've got to do that times 2 or times 4 or however many people are included in your application. So make sure that you're also getting your police certificates for your wife or for kids who are over the age of 18. Make sure you're getting those e-medicals booked for all of your family members as well. And that's probably going to compound the time that it takes to get all those documents gathered.
Excellent. That's a great tip. Thank you. Okay, so let's get to some questions. Now I'm going to put a few parameters around this, you guys. As I go through here, I'm pulling out the ones that relate to our topic today. In particular, it is, basically, is this the best of times or the worst of times for people? I think my position is that these are absolutely the best of times, but I can tell you the reason I included that in the title is because it can also be the absolute worst of times if you make those simple little mistakes, those avoidable mistakes that can result in your application getting returned. There's just rarely a second chance. And so let's get to some of these questions. Let's pull them up. I'm going to have to do a little adjusting here because I know some of these are taking up the whole screen. There's a big one. Okay. So here's the question from Jeffin, and he says, hi, Mark and Alicia. For express entry for a CC inland applicant who's on a work permit now with accompanying spouse in India, can he apply for a spousal open work permit? Or will IRCC basically reject the application because there's a PR application in process? What's your thoughts on that, Alicia?
I'm trying to figure out if they're also trying to do a spousal sponsorship.
It looks like, I think what he intends is that accompanying spouse is included in the express entry application. So they're an accompanying spouse from outside Canada that are included in this brand new, invitation to apply. And now they're getting ready to submit their EAPR. But, I'm already on a work permit. Can I apply for a spousal open work permit, for them to come join me? Is IRCC going to let me do that knowing that we're in the midst of filing a PR application? What do you think? It's kind of a loaded question, but hey, we can say whatever we want. So
for any open work permit or visitor visa application or study permit application, they're all temporary residence applications. And the requirement for all of those is that you prove you have a temporary intent. So maybe it's possible, but you've got to work really hard to prove that you've got a temporary intent. What does that mean? That means you've got to show that you're going to return to your home country. You've got ties to your home country. You're going to comply with the period of authorized work if you're given a work permit, and you're going to leave at the end of that time of period of work. So it all depends on, can you prove temporary intent? It also is going to depend on the officer you get in terms of how skeptical they are about that application.
Yeah. Great answer. Yeah. And I agree. I agree with you. Yeah, 100%. All right. Now this is fun. I love this. Okay, here we go. Check this one out, Alicia. Look at this. That person look familiar to you? So Omo here says, great seeing Alicia. She helped me review my work experience reference letter. She knows what she's talking about, guys. Such a brilliant and patient lady. Thanks, Alicia. 73 days post AOR. I'm going to give one of these ones. Awesome. Very, very cool. She knows what she's talking about. She knows. All right, let's see what we've got here. We've got a couple hellos. We'll post the hellos. Why not? And then Robert saying hello as well. This is a good question. So Parvinder says, are they going to give PR to refugees? And I'm not sure if there's a continuation here. I don't see continuation, but are they going to give PR to refugees? Now, I don't know if you know where this person is going. I think I know. There's the Guardian Angel program, right? So in Quebec, those refugee claimants who were in Quebec, and volunteered to put themselves at risk on the front line, caring in the extended care facilities, caring for the elderly in elderly care homes. There's a program in place to help facilitate the transition of these people, because of their sacrifice, literally of their life in some cases, to help protect those who are the most vulnerable in our society. And so, are they going to give PR to refugees? What do you think, Alicia? You think our government is, and I'll throw one other thing while I'm letting you kind of formulate your thoughts. As with the Canadian Bar Association, we have lots of opportunities, and I'm the national chair me and my fellow table officers, Ravi Jain, Lisa Middlemiss, and Kyle Heineman, we have an opportunity to meet with lots of politicians and the department and, the minister and his staff. And one of the questions that came up in those meetings was, how in the world are we going to meet these 401,000 target? And I think it's over 100,000 basically for the economic class in particular. But how are we going to do this when the borders are closed? We can't bring all these wonderful federal skilled worker candidates in. Believe me, you guys, they want to bring you in, but public health is blocking them. They can't because of the public health restrictions. They would bring you all in right now if they could. They wouldn't have people with expired COPRs. And it's literally a decision that's out of their hands. And so in the midst of those discussions, they asked, well, okay, what options, what can we do? So members of our Canadian Bar Association, independent members, and informally, not formally through the CBA and the table officers, we put together a list of suggestions to the minister about ways in which they could potentially look to transition more people that are already in Canada. And number 2 on the list was was dropping down, doing more CEC draws and dropping down the rounds of invitations for express entry. But also on that list, other lawyers had proposed, extending opportunities for refugee claimants that were maybe working on the front lines, that were more expansive than the Guardian Angel program. And so, everybody that's in Canada. Now, there's a lot of different political reasons and policy reasons why they do what they do. But it's a fair question, Parvinder. And maybe, I guess, is the answer. What are your thoughts, Alicia?
I think if there's a chance for some sort of program to happen, it's probably better now than it ever has been because of COVID and because of the travel restrictions. There is also talk about maybe expanding the home child care providers. So if you have refugees who are working as care providers, doing personal care attendants, nanny type jobs for kids, or working for elderly or disabled individuals, then maybe they'll expand that program. Maybe they'll put more in terms of the quota into there, or maybe there'll be some sort of like that Guardian Angel program or an amnesty program for certain people to apply. But who knows?
Yep. I'll put this one up here. He's not done yet. Alicia is just brilliant.
That's very sweet of you.
Awesome. Okay, so here's what Robert says. He says, hey, Mark, just want to ask your thoughts or maybe prediction for the next CEC draw. When will be the possible draw date, and will they maintain a low score? Robert, this is probably one of the most asked questions out there. And I'll tell you, I don't think they're done. I do not think IRCC is done. Today, there were many, many consultants and many lawyers who were fielding calls from their clients who told them, you just don't have a chance at qualifying through CEC, so there's no point submitting a profile. So there are many representatives that are fielding calls from their clients and many individual applicants who maybe they went through my course. And I said, here's the rounds of invitations. And, the likelihood of it dropping down is so low. And I considered it negligent to take someone's money to submit a profile. My goodness, someone who had a CRS score of 75, if they paid someone, if a lawyer was paid to submit a profile for someone at 75, I would have considered that negligent. I would have considered reporting them to the Law Society. But this whole world, our whole ground has shifted. And I can tell you that thousands and thousands of people right now are scrambling at this very moment to get their application, their profile in when it wasn't before. So that's the first thing I'd recommend everybody does. Obviously, at Healthy Immigration Law, we can help you with that. But most importantly, you don't have a shot unless you try. Now, Alicia's gone to great lengths to explain what qualifies and what doesn't. It doesn't help you to submit a profile is doomed for failure, that you're not, that you are not going to qualify. Any agent, consultant, or anyone who's telling you that go ahead and submit it when you don't meet the eligibility requirements, that is negligent. And I have no patience for that because it clogs up the system, and it's also unfair to you, having this faint hope. So don't let anyone peddle. If you don't meet the requirements that Alicia went through in painstaking detail, then don't listen to anyone who's trying to tell you otherwise, okay? If you need to book a consult, go ahead, Alicia. Yeah.
I was just going to say that's really important, Mark, because it's not as though officers, this is not a temporary residence application. It's not a visitor visa. Officers don't have discretion. They cannot override what the legislation says here. If you don't meet the requirements of Regulation 87.1 sub 1 that we went through today, you will never qualify. Nobody can kind of extend you H&C consideration. It's specifically
Yes.
prohibited.
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. With some, there is the option to apply for some humanitarian and compassionate considerations to override maybe the fact that you don't meet eligibility in some immigration programs, but not with express entry. It's specifically prohibited by law. All right. So what's my thoughts? I think was the question. What's my prediction? Well, I don't think they're done. I honestly believe that with thousands that pile in 2 weeks' time, I can almost guarantee that there's going to be 3,000 more people into the queue. That's enough for another round of invitations. At target levels of over 100,000, 27,332 invitations, we're at the beginning of the year. That ain't going to cut it. If all those people go through, it ain't going to cut it. So they have to act quickly to pull in as many people as they can. And I'll tell you something, if there was 35,000 people that were in Canada, that were in the CEC, they all would have been pulled out as well. So do the math. So my recommendation is go for it, do it, get it in. And I would not be surprised if even within the month, there's another round of invitations that's a full big scoop, just like we have right here, because they need to get people in right now submitting applications so that they can process them by the end of the year to meet levels. There's my thoughts on that. Okay. Iman says here, with this massive number of ITAs, the PR processing time will be long. It will. There's no way of getting around it, Iman. With everybody filing their applications as quickly as possible now, without a doubt, it's going to have an impact on processing. Now, remember that we also have many overseas missions that are not operating at full capacity because of the social distancing requirements in those countries, and a whole host of other things. If people can't travel, there's no point issuing visas, permanent resident visas to people if they can't travel. So there are more officers that are now becoming more equipped to work in their homes. And I want to share something with these people. And I'm going to switch over here to just the view here for me. I want you to picture something, okay? And we talk about, hey, subscribe to the course. Let me teach you. Let us help you. If you need assistance, book a consult with us. We can help you to navigate your way through. And if you feel inclined, retain us. We can collaboratively work with you all the way through to submit your application. But I want you to picture this. And I think you guys know I was a former immigration officer, and in a previous life, some of my staff right now actually have one, staff previously that I've had in my office worked with immigration, and others have gone over to the other side, to the government. But I want you to picture something now. I want you to picture an officer, and she's working out of her home. She has been working out of her home on a laptop just like this. She has her family. She has her spouse. She has her children that are all working and studying from home as well. And she's cooped up in this small little nook in her bedroom because she has to maintain confidentiality while she's processing your application. And she's going through the process, and she sees this application that was thrown together, that was disorganized, that had this long letter of explanation with these random comments and thoughts, with documents that are not perfect, with people trying to explain their hours of work. And she's under tight timelines. She knows that there's this overwhelming tsunami of applications now. 27,000 that are coming in. She has supervisors telling her she needs to process by a certain period of time. And she's looking at the screen and she's thinking to herself, oh my goodness, that's what they're feeling right now. The pressures to process, the pressures to keep the processing times down, to turn applications around. She is not going to be your friend. She is going to be in full preservation mode. She is going to be looking at an application that's a disaster, and she's going to be looking for a way out. There you go. I don't think the right knock was chosen. I'm refusing your application. Phew, it's done, out the door. Then she gets yours, and you just finished the step-by-step course. You've gone through and gotten all of your questions answered. You have followed the templates. You've used the Knox selection tool that we have, as well as the one that Alicia has provided to us to carefully document your hours. The officer looks at your application. The letters of explanation are perfectly aligned. Everything's easy to follow. And that officer says, oh, what a relief. That was literally the most well-prepared application that I've had all day and the easiest to approve of all. And so this is a reality. And I want you guys to understand that. And so if there's little mistakes, little things that you omit, that officer is going to be, like I said, they're not your friend. They are going to be doing what they can to survive in the midst of this tsunami. So keep that in mind as we go through all of this. Keep that in mind as we're talking about these things. Keep that in mind as you're like, oh, they're droning on about the law, blah, 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 blah. Just get to the part where I can ask my question. If you guys are prepared, you will get through and you'll realize your dream. If you rush or you're relying on someone that you know really doesn't know what they're doing, why in the world would you put your future in Canada at risk? So, all right, there's my little spiel, and it's as true of a description that I could possibly come up with. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Okay, this is a Facebook user who is probably, I bet you, in the Express Entry Law private Facebook group. That's why they're not appearing up here. These private groups don't let us show who's actually posting these, which is, I think we're over 126,000 over there in that group now. Okay, so it's possible. Is it possible to get an ITA even though the language test you don't meet the requirements of the language test? So I'll paraphrase this. Or only the eligible people, I think is what they're getting at, that have that language, can they receive an ITA? So I think it's pretty clear for this one, Alicia. For this Facebook user, there are minimum standards. So if you're outside of Canada, you cannot get into the pool unless you have at least a CLB 7, which I think is about a 6 across the board with the IELTS. I never deal with it hardly at all, so I just can't remember. So an invitation to apply, you must meet those eligibility requirements, and that's at least a 6 on the IELTS. But even then, with that minimum amount, you're not even going to come close unless you really have a CLB 9, which is the 8 in listening and 7 and everything else. But in Canada, if you're in Canada and working, that's a different story. And that CLB 5 is much more attainable, but you'll never get an ITA unless you have those minimum language test results. Does that sound accurate, Alicia?
Yeah, and there is a website that goes through and compares those language results for CEC and FSW, and then what that translates to under IELTS and CELPIP. It's different to try to figure out what those Canadian language benchmarks are.
Gotcha. Okay, here's a good question from Shaw. Working online from inside Canada is not a problem, isn't it?
So it depends. It depends if you're working inside Canada on a valid work permit and whether you've got a Canadian employer and you can prove that and it fits with the knock that you've selected in your Express Entry profile, or if you're going to change it, that you do so really, really carefully.
Yeah. And I think what we're getting at here, Shaw, whenever we get these questions, right, these are loaded questions because working online from inside Canada is not a problem. Well, if that employer is not in Canada, like Alicia said, and you're working for an employer who's outside of Canada, then you ain't getting points for that. So that's the difference. Okay, let's see what we have here. Okay, here's a good question. Another person in the Express Entry Law group. Can I remove foreign work experience after an ITA as it won't fall down the 75 score? so it won't be below. So what are your thoughts on that one? If you've got foreign work experience listed in your profile, and then this magical, like literally this will affect every single person who's submitting their applications from this draw. Can they drop off some of their foreign work experience and submit their application without it? What do you think?
So maybe you've got to make sure you're not misrepresenting, right? So you've got to be really honest in terms of what it is that you did for all of your work experience. However, you do have a choice when it talks about what sort of work experience you're you're going to include, if you don't rely on it for points, then you can put it into your personal history. If you have it in your work history section, you need to have a letter for each and every period of employment that you're relying on for points. So if you don't need that foreign work experience and you didn't claim it, maybe you didn't claim it from the beginning, then put it into your personal history and explain that that's what you did with your time, but you don't have to prove it. If your question is you did claim it on that express entry profile and now you realize there's no possible way you're getting that letter from that employer, well, maybe you can drop it off, but you got to be careful about how you do so.
Yeah. And we will say this repeatedly, everyone. If done correctly, it could work. And so, this is where it comes down to us who've done this for a lifetime, what it seems like now. It's a delicate little dance that you have to undertake to pull things off of your profile when you're transitioning to your EAPR. The letters of explanation are the secret sauce. And if you do those properly, an officer can understand why you're doing what you're doing. And let's face it, sometimes it is true. You can't get a letter from an employer. And if that employer is not necessary, that work history is not necessary to meet the minimum entry criteria or the eligibility criteria for one of the economic programs, then it may be possible if done correctly. All right. Okay, let's see here. This is interesting. Ender says, can you please explain a little bit about the minimum wage per hour required? Thanks. You familiar with the minimum wage, Alicia?
I have had this question pop up, and I think it's probably people are worried that the officer won't believe that they're doing the knock that they claim because their wage is too low. And in Canada, there's general minimum wage requirements for various jobs. So that's usually set by the province. You've got to check what the provincial wage standards are. There are exceptions. So some industries do not have a minimum wage. But for the purposes of immigration, the minimum wage is not one of the criteria they're assessing. They're assessing the National Occupation Classification Code, the lead statement, and the majority of the main duties.
Yeah, exactly. And, did you get paid? That's the question that Express Entry is asking. Now, I had a situation come up in my step-by-step group this morning in the live stream that we did. And one of the questions was, I have an LMIA with a certain knock code. And I now realize that the knock code might have been wrong. Or and so in that situation, when you're talking about choosing the right knock and you're on a work permit in Canada that says your knock code is one thing and you're switching, well, that can be a pretty big problem. And so we talked about the need to really dance that carefully, because if you're working outside the confines of that knock code that's on your LMIA-based work permit, that can result in problems with the employer maintaining compliance to their obligations. But that same principle exists for the purposes of wage. And if you're saying that your employer is sketch and they're maybe underpaying you and you have an LMIA and they're not honoring it, or like the fine consultant in my town here in Lethbridge who ran a separate business and had a separate set of books and employed people and made them work longer hours so that they could, so that she could charge them less and exploit them for the benefit of her business. I'm so glad that she's under investigation now. Well, if that's the situation, it becomes very problematic. And I think for most people that are on post-grad work permits, the wage issue, if you look at the National Occupational Classification System and you see, wait a minute, the wage I'm being paid as a post-grad student isn't at the prevailing wage. It's, yes, legal above minimum, but it's at the low end. That's okay. So your wage as a post-grad does not have to meet the prevailing wage or that average wage that's listed in the national on basically the National Occupational Classification, actually the job bank, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So that's something to take into consideration. Okay, we will go through a few more questions here. Alicia, if I showed you the questions that are piling up here, I might have to let Alicia drop off because she actually has a family that needs her. My family are pretty independent. My wife tolerates long hours of me sitting in front of this computer, but we may have Alicia drop off here. You can just say, Mark, I'm checking out here. I'm checking out and I'll switch over to the screen, but I really want to try to spend as much time to answer people's questions as possible. Okay, let's see right here. I think this is an extension of Shaw. I think Shaw asked this already about working in Canada. Okay, well, we've got a little bit more here. So let's see what we've got here. So online, is it okay? Isn't it? Oh, I think they maybe didn't finish their question. And again, what about if I work paid, but from outside Canada for a few months? My company wants me to visit outside business. Okay. So that's basically someone who's employed by a Canadian company has been put on assignment. They're still being paid, but they're outside of the country. Can you count that? This is where I'm going to help Alicia, and I'm going to go right here if I can find it, and I'm going to click this one. So Shaw, that is one that we cannot answer. So you actually are going to need to book a consult, and we're going to need to go into that in depth and look at it a lot more detail, because there's way more information that we're going to need to be able to give you, an answer. And it really hits on this, which is legal advice. All right, moving on. We've got Ricardo from Spain. Hello, Ricardo. Okay, here's a good question. So Leo says, hey, I got an ITA from CIC recently. I'll give you one of these, my friend. Congratulations. He says, but when I check my experience with the exact date, it's not 1 year. I need some more days. So Alicia, do you want to tackle that one? I know the answer to this one.
And that's exactly why we developed that CEC hours of work tool, right? Because you're going to look conservatively. So we have that column for hours, right? So add up all your hours. Then we have the column for weeks, add up all your weeks. And then we have the column for months and add up all your months. But conservatively, so if you look at all those columns and you're not meeting that 1 year, so either that 1,560 hours or the 12 months or the 52 weeks, then you probably are not going to qualify for that ITA. And that's the hard part. That's why it
Yeah.
might be the worst of times.
Yeah. And one thing that recently in the discussion, so this question came up in our monthly meetings with IRCC, the immigration representatives, what this question came up. And so one of the things that we definitely pointed out, Alicia's alluded to the fact that, look, you haven't met those requirements. And so my thought was, well, look, that is cruel. Why is that fair for them to give you an ITA when they're calculating based on months? And so they're actually giving you credit when you haven't actually obtained it. The system forces you to answer it that way. So how is that fair? Well, it is possible, when done correctly, to continue forward and submit your application when you're in that type of a situation that you've described here, Joseph. If you handle it correctly and you wait, and this is how I advise my clients, if you're currently working and it's just that they've given you those extra points and you haven't yet reached it, but you're still working now, then in those circumstances, it may be possible to just wait to file your EAPR until you've fully accumulated that full 1 year. Even though you got your ITA earlier, if you describe it properly and do it correctly, then it is possible to work. And I know there's a lot of you that are going to be in a situation where declining is not an option, where you have to consider presenting your best case possible and taking a run at it and seeing if you can convince an officer, because you know that the likelihood of it dropping down to even 300, come on, you guys, like 350 is where a lot of you are at. 75 is just bonkers. But the likelihood of it happening again is really, really low. Even though I think it could, you just don't want to take a chance 6 months down the road when the world is kind of shifted back to some semblance of normal and then get your application returned. But if it's done correctly, it may be possible to save it. And if you look below, you click on the link, you can book a consult with us and we can help you sort that out. All right, continuing on here. I love this. This is my personal favorite. This Facebook person is tagging Harsey, saying, Harsey, get over here and listen to these awesome immigration lawyers that are talking about express entry. Okay, so we'll skip through here. Okay, this one's from Suresh. And he says, I got the ITA in the last draw CEC. I'm going to give him one of these. I had claimed a job offer points of 50. So can I choose to not claim it after the ITA? My current CRS is 488. Will it impact my application? I'm almost tempted to do one of these, Alicia. And I think we've talked about this quite a bit. The reality is you have to be very, very careful when you're dropping things off, and you must be extremely careful that you're explaining why, your rationale, and that there's no chance that an officer could suggest that you have misrepresented. My first question is, if you claim job offer points, why are you not doing so now? If it's because your employer has laid you off and they can't guarantee that you're going to be employed for a year, Well, okay, that's fair, right? And I think you explain that to an officer. Although they can be cruel and heartless, they are human beings. And if explained properly and if you do it correctly, it could potentially work. But like so many people, this is not something that you take lightly and just handle willy-nilly, because the last thing you need as an officer to feel like somehow you've misrepresented something and then reject your application and give you a 5-year bar. Any thoughts on that, Alicia?
I think the arranged employment points are also something that's often misunderstood by people. So read the requirements for a valid job offer or arranged employment very carefully, because there's different requirements for LMIA exempt jobs and ones that are open work permits, which are pretty rare, right? Most of those require that you've already been working in Canada for that 1 year.
All right. Okay, this one. And George, I recognize your name. I think George is registered for the February 22nd course. You can give me a thumbs up, George, if that's the case. But I think George is registered for the next upcoming Express Entry step-by-step course. So let's see what George has asked here. It might be a little bit too detailed for us here. I claimed 1 year experience, February the 3rd, 2020 till February 2021. Okay, 1 year experience. When I file my EAPR, should I include all my pay? Okay, this is one. We can handle this one, George. Should I include all pay statements up to the date of my application submission or only up to February the 13th? So he's a Feb 13er. This is awesome. I'm so happy for you guys. So what we advise our clients is that if you're in Canada, often they don't have too much concern about whether or not your employer actually exists. So there's lots of evidence of it. So reference letter, make sure it's good. We love that. It says pay slips if available. So yes, include them. If it's only a year that you're claiming, it's not a bad thing to include all of them. It doesn't hurt. Sometimes when people are claiming larger periods of time, 4 or 5 years, my goodness, how are you going to fit it into the 4 megabyte minimum space that they give you? So in those cases, we'll often tell them to include some from the beginning, some from the end, and maybe 1 or 2 from the years in between. I recently had a client for the first time who was actually asked to provide pay slips. And it was an application submitted by another representative. And then they came over to me, and it's damage control essentially. But the officer only asked for the first 2 pay slips when work started. So I'm not going to say that's the rule. I always like to include the front end and the back end. But in your situation, for 1 year, if it fits, there's no harm doing it. And then throw in your T4 if you have one. And I'm usually pretty okay with that. Alicia, any other thoughts?
I mean, if you have extra pay stubs, if that's what they're asking, right? If you go all the way up until when you submit that EAPR and you have them, then sure, submit a few of the most recent ones as well. That can't hurt.
Yeah. And you're right, George. February, you Feb 13ers. When the ITA is issued is when your work history is locked in. So you're not, although I take back what I was saying. Well, I shouldn't say I take back, but I'll qualify what I said to the other person who said I haven't yet met it. For the purposes of Express Entry, you are locked in on that date that you received the ITA. And so anything that happens after doesn't affect your CRS score, but it can affect your eligibility. So you have to watch that if there's job offers and things like that are in place. And especially if you're claiming a job offer and you're no longer working, and then you submit that application, that's going to be problematic. All right. Well, we're pretty late here, Alicia. Where are you at? Did you want to stick around for a few more, or do you want to drop off? It's totally fine either way.
I can do a couple. If you hear piano in the background, it's because my kids are on their Zoom lesson.
No problem. Okay, let's see here. Okay, let's see what Matt has to say. So Matt says, someone said the next draw won't be quick, probably May, but the target 400,000, that's at least 15 times the last draw. 20 times if 70% eligible. How come IRCC completes the target without keep going? Okay, Matt, no one knows exactly what's going to happen. I would disagree with whoever told you that they're not going to do anything till May. I just don't believe that. The target of 400K or 401 includes all immigrants, not just economic. So we're probably looking at maybe a little over 100 in reality. So your figure is based on considering everybody is an Express Entry candidate within that 400,000, and that's not the case. it's a little over 100,000. I can't remember the exact figure. So that's really what we're looking at. But like I said in the beginning, if you just jumped on late, I think that that immigration is not done. And with all of the people that missed out on this, if they're not Feb 13ers who missed out, they're all scrambling now to put their applications in the chance they do it again. And I would not be surprised within a week that they've got another 3,000 people with applications in that never dreamed they would have been able to qualify. And if they're trying to meet those targets, they can't bring people in from outside, why wouldn't they do another big scoop? So that's my thoughts. Anything to add on that one, Alicia?
Yeah, just that target is the overall target. So that includes family class applications, and it includes other sorts of immigration applications for permanent residents, not just the economic categories.
Yeah. This is fun. Celine, she's in mine right now. So she says, hey guys, go reserve your slots for Mark's masterclass. It's a great resource. It will guide you every step of the way. Thank you, Celine. I will see you in the morning in the next class. We actually just covered, we have 1 full hour devoted exclusively to reference letters, the records of employment, and job offers. And that was today, and it was a doozy. We actually went a little bit longer, all the way up until I got the call from Nicholas Kyung, and I think maybe the Star article might be out already. I told them if he calls, I have to drop off, and so we went into extra time. And then my phone was ringing, and so then I had to drop off of the Facebook Live and leave them hanging a little bit, but I couldn't very well stand them up. And so I'm curious as to whether the Star article is out. Maybe if you guys, some of you see it, you can let me know. It should be. There's this ugly picture of me, I think probably at the beginning, that I just had to take this morning. My son, he was kind enough to be the photographer. So, oh boy, life is interesting. Okay. Okay, now we've got a couple repeaters here. Yeah, so then we've got someone else asking, hey, they're going to do the same crazy massive draw in the future. We're just not sure. Let's see here. Okay, here's a tough one. And this one, I'll bring this up. It's big. It's going to take up our whole screen. It's a big, big one, Alicia. But this one is actually really, really important because it's something that many, many people are going to face. So anyone that's in Canada that has been subject to a layoff, that's where this Facebook user who's in the Express Entry Law private Facebook group, go over there and join it. And also subscribe to the YouTube channel, because I don't have enough subscribers. I need more. So he said, this individual says, I'm currently employed in a company, okay, for 16 months, but in between, they were laid off for 2 months in March, which was so common during COVID. I split the work experience in my profile period, and my employer mentioned the layoff period in the reference letter. Wow, is this the right way to do the job? This is a post-ITA query. I'm going to give you one of these. That's exactly what I would tell you to do. If you have a period where you actually are laid off, I don't just ignore it and just put it as one block in your work history section. Yes, break it into 2 pieces, and then your employer in the reference letter explaining that layoff. Awesome. And 16 months minus 2, you're good to go, my friend. So very good. Awesome, awesome. Any other words of wisdom there, Alicia?
I'd just add that there would be a record of employment, so that ROE is going to record the fact that that person ended the job, and then they're going to have a new period of employment. So that's the right way to do it. You don't want to claim that as a continuous period of work if you were laid off for part of that.
Excellent. This one's in your wheelhouse. This is one that you've talked about, and this viewer may have tuned in a little bit. James may have tuned in a little bit later. So this is kind of funny. So what do you think about this one? Do you know of a definition for 1 year, whether it counts as 52 weeks of full-time work, minimum 30 hours, or 366 days if it is a leap year?
So actually, the hours is good, right? Because one of the things too that immigration talks about is they won't count hours over 30 hours. So if you work a 40-hour work week, you can't add up those 40 hours to take account of work weeks where you might have only worked 10 hours, for example.
Mhm.
So it maxes out at 30. But when you look at the definition from that hours tool that we have, or what's on the website for immigration's interpretation, it does say 1,560 hours, 1 year. It doesn't have to be over a 1 year period. It can be spread out over more than a 1 year period. For CEC, they're looking at the 3 previous years. So you can cobble together those periods of work so that it adds up to 1 full year over a 3 year period, but it doesn't have to be only all in one 365 or 66-day period.
Great. This is an easy one. Another one for you, Alicia. This is from Darwin. He says, hey, Mark and Alicia, my wife has 22 years of work experience in her profile. Oh my goodness, that must have taken you guys a while to enter that in the EAPR. And you know what, Darwin, I love this fact that you guys are older, because I'm an old man myself, turning 49 this year. I don't know where the time went, but I'm a 0 for immigration. So they value me as much as, well, dirt, essentially, if I was to immigrate, that is. Until now. So if you're in Canada, you've been slogging away, you've had your profile in, and now you've shown me here that your spouse, 22 years of work experience. That is so awesome. I just love that. Should we declare just the past 10 years and delete anything prior? I am perfectly fine. And Alicia, I'll let you answer that. What do you think?
Yeah, and this is what we were talking about before, Mark. Like, there's a difference between what you're claiming for your work experience points and what you're going to back up with your letters of employment, and then what you put in your personal history. So all of it has to go in the personal history. Good for you. Claim all those 22 years of work experience. But for the work experience category, claim what you're going to use for points.
Yeah, exactly. Great question. All right, let's see here. Okay, this is a happy story. Okay, Annette. And Annette, I think we have crossed paths before. It's the best of times for CEC who have been working and waiting for so long. I'm going to give you one of these ones because this is so true. She's a Feb 13er. We are U.S. citizens that have been living and working in Ontario for 3 years now. For our police certificate from the U.S., is it done through FBI, CGIS division? We often, Annette, use the channelers. And they're the fastest ones to get police certificates to the FBI. And when you go to the website and you just type in the US police certificates, it'll give you the instructions on how to do that. But congratulations, Annette. That is so, so wonderful. I think you've been kind of tracking me for quite a while. I'd love for you to join the course. Come join us and we can make sure that you get it right. Make sure that this really gift from heaven is the way I describe it. That's come to so many of you in your exact situation. Yeah, that it's done properly, and that you're able to fully capitalize and realize this goal of becoming a permanent resident. Wow. I'm so, so happy for you guys. That is just awesome. That is just awesome. Okay, let's see here. I'm hesitant to post these ones. I just want to post the ones for Alicia. Mark, you are a great man. I mean, people are inspired from you. Keep going, bro. So I'll give you an applause. Thank you. That's what feeds me. That's what helps me continue going forward. And here we got another thank you from Robert after we answered his question. You're very, very welcome. And let's see here. Okay, here's another one for Alicia. I think actually I think James, we already answered your question. You double posters. Okay. Okay. This is a very, very interesting question. This is a tough one. Maybe, yeah, I'm not sure if we have a right answer for this one, but Annex says, hey, Mark and Alicia, good to see you both. Off topic. Well, it's actually not off topic. What happens if an applicant cannot make payment due to a crashed IRCC website and the timeline expires? Do IRCC extend timelines, or it's a gone case? I have heard conflicting things about this. One of the most difficult parts of this is proving that that's what happened. And all I can tell you is that if you are trying to submit your application and a crash happens, and this is just off the top of my head, print that screen, take a screenshot. I like printing it because sometimes there'll be a date stamp on the bottom. And so you take every effort that you can to document that crash when it happens immediately. Now, obviously, this is advice that's probably going to be given in hindsight now because there's not much you can do after the fact. But if that ever happens, and right now the portal is a hot mess. It is a disaster. It is crashing repeatedly. In fact, over the weekend, even the immigration officers couldn't access it. I was able to finish a review this afternoon, so I know it's been back up, but we were bounced out repeatedly. So in those circumstances, when you're doing the payment section, boy, you're going to really be pushing it. So first off, never wait until the last minute to actually submit. Even if you're one of those people that's immobilized by perfection and you just can't because you're always worried, am I missing something? That's why I've got the course so that I can tell you, don't worry. But if you're in that situation, that's what I recommend. Alicia, any thoughts?
Yeah, screenshots are fantastic. Immigration usually says, clear your browser cache, change your browsers, use Chrome, use a different sort of Internet Explorer, try different things. But you definitely don't want to be leaving it to the very last minute. The other thing is your deadline is usually based on UTC time, and not a lot
Yeah.
of people realize that. And so if you're in a different time zone, you may have, 10 hours less than you think you have to get that application submitted and paid.
Exactly. Couple quick ones. So this one's, I like to see these ones. I'll tell you, Alicia, could you please help me to submit my application? I got an invitation. You deserve, Virgil, you deserve that. Click on the links below. There's a place for a consult and there's a place to register for the course. And those who actually are our clients, they get both. But ultimately, with the consults, remember that when you book one with us, you can go and schedule your own time right now while Alicia and I are here doing this live. You can schedule, you can pay for it, it's all set up. And whatever you pay for your consult is credited towards the fee when you ultimately retain us. So keep that in mind. We'd love to work with you. We'll watch for your renewal. All right, here we have Billy here with the wave. He says, hi, Mark. Watching here in Victoria, BC and getting some information from you is very helpful. What do you think of the next CEC draw? Well, as I said, and I probably answered it, right after you posted this question, I'm going to think that IRCC isn't done just yet. What do you think, Alicia?
I think at this point, there's no downside to going and making sure you've got that profile. So to do that, you need your education credential assessment and you need your language results, right? Those two things are essential to be able to create your profile. And of course, the minimum eligibility criteria. If you meet that, then right now, it's probably your best shot at ever getting an invitation to apply. So you might as well.
Yeah, you got nothing to lose. I agree. This Facebook user asks kind of a general question. How do I know if I qualify? How do I calculate my points? Go to the IRCC website and type in CRS tool. And that will take you to the IRCC website where you can punch in your information and it will tell you. All right. So Lau, no, the invitations were only through the Canadian Experience class. So these Feb 13ers, they were all CEC candidates that, and I shouldn't say outside of Canada because there were some people that qualified that are not in Canada now, but had already accumulated that 1 year of skilled work experience and the minimum language requirements. So it's not that they don't get an opportunity, but when they're drawn and they submit their application, they are then subject to the same block that all of the other FSW candidates who are also outside Canada are stuck. So until public health lifts the travel restrictions, new OICs, indicate that finally people can fly, it's so strange that it's been, Alicia, like I just think about what's been lost. Like think about this, a whole year. Huh. Wow. No one ever envisioned that this pandemic would be like it is. And you think about families that are separated and we have clients that, that we work with that are, have been apart and have not been able to reunite. We have so many people that have been affected. We've had people that have lost family members because of this. And this pandemic is now almost become like just a routine part of our day. But my goodness, I think we're all about ready for it to end. And I can imagine I can picture a day when there's no more COVID, when there's no more self-isolation, when there's no more masks, when there's just normal life. And that's what I'm shooting for. That's what I'm holding out for. All right. So there's the answer to that one. Hello, Adish. Nothing like getting emotional in the live stream. Nothing like a lawyer getting emotional. It's all good. Okay. First of congratulations. Okay. All right. I love that one. Don't have a clue what that person was saying. Okay. Well, let's wrap this up here. We've got the big questions we're going to have to hold off on because I can't sort through those ones. And we'll try to fix it. We'll try to fixate these to the Feb 13ers. Okay, so here's one, Adish. So Adish says, I just created my profile on February the 13th. I completed my 1-year experience this month. When do you think the next draw will be? Also, will it be this low? My total CRS score is around 380. Please advise. Adish, anything is possible, like we've talked about. It is entirely possible that your ITA could come. And you've done the right thing. You've given yourself a shot. It's too bad that you didn't have it in before, but there were so many people in your situation. So you're not alone. Okay, we'll see if we can just about wrap up here. We got one of these, which I love those ones. Thank you so much. Anonymous Facebook user. God bless you as well. Let's see here. Okay, here's Alicia. I'm not sure if we can answer this one. This one is really tough. We're going to see a lot of this. So my post-grad work permit was expired last October. Currently, I'm having a closed work permit. In this case, am I eligible to apply for a post-grad work permit extension of 18 months? And so they've already used it up. It's expired. They've already switched over to a closed one. And I'm not sure what the rationale is moving from the LMIA to a regular one. But what are your thoughts? I don't know if I have an answer for this, Alicia.
I don't know if I do either, Mark. I think we'd probably have to get more information in terms of what happened in this circumstance. There is a public policy, right? So there is that new public policy. So you'd have to compare this person's life circumstance to what happened with the public policy. But in general, postgrad work permits are only issued once. And the only time where you can recapture time is if your passport was expiring and then you just got that initial period extended on that postgrad work permit, but they don't issue a second postgrad work permit usually.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Well, so that's a tough one that we're not going to be able to answer. Okay, let's just see here. I'm just trying to see if we can finish this off. Okay, so this person here says, hey, can I create an express entry profile even if my score is low? Thank you. Yes, as long as you meet the minimum eligibility criteria for the program that you're applying through. Okay, Aman says, my friend wants to ask you. Your friend should just ask us. His CAC 1-year experience will be done on the 28th of February, 21. So when should he create a profile, right now or after 20th of February? Don't create it until you know you've met the eligibility. That's one of the things that I usually advise people. And that's one of the challenges, because then you get into the situation where, you get drawn and then you don't meet the requirements. So I always advise till you actually, not until you actually hit it. Okay, Leo says one more here. Thanks for answering. One more. The IRCC officer will consider my application if I have 1 year of experience when the respected officer. Oh, that one kind of ended off. So we'll jump down here to Robert. He says, I've lodged an express entry profile 3 days before the expiry date of my current work permit, LMIA, because a new one is on the way with the same employer. Would that be okay or not? So I'm trying to understand what Robert's asking here. It may be if he's wondering if he can count the implied status period as work experience. And yes, you can, Robert, you can count that. As long as you didn't fall out of status, you can count that. He said application, not when I got the ITA. Oh, okay. Don't know what that is. We'll keep moving on. Okay. James says, thank you. You should have a Patreon. I would love to support you. Do you know what that is, Alicia? It's basically you put this little YouTubers do it. If I was a gamer, people who want their questions to appear because they feel like they're, the people doing the YouTubes are like celebrities and they want them to identify their name on the screen. They have this spot where you can pay like $1 or $2 to get your question bumped up, or a separate account where they can just pay you for being a good person, I guess. James, you're awesome. Do you know what you can do? You can subscribe to the course, my friend. That would be awesome. Or engage Alicia and the wonderful lawyers in our firm. Okay, Annette. Yep. Thank you, Mark. You bet. I knew you, Annette. I knew you. Rajul, thanks. Great. They're going to do it now. Awesome. Okay. This Facebook user, we're actually just about to the end here. As long as they don't keep filling in. Received an ITA December 20th, FSW. If the COPA arrives prior to travel restrictions being lifted, what is the process to land? You can't. So you just stay put until they give you the green light. You can't travel at all. Okay. And then here's George. Remember I told you? He said, yes, it's me in the course, excited to perfection my application. I'll give you one of these, George. There is room, you guys, but it is filling up fast. It starts February the 22nd, and it's the full course plus yours truly. And that's how we've done it. That added masterclass, I don't market the course as a standalone option anymore. It comes with the materials plus me. All right, you bet. And Nick, you're very welcome. Okay, this Facebook user says, I submitted my profile, but it's showing pending. What to do? What do you think, Alicia?
I assume they just haven't gotten their ITA yet. Right. I think that's probably what they mean.
Yeah, hang in there. It'll come. Hang in there. Okay, and then we've got another. Shaw says, thank you, Mark and Alicia, for your time. It means a lot for so many. Stay blessed. Boom. There's one for you. And we'll just ask, these are filling up. You guys are filling these up before I can get to the end. I'm so close. Garrison says, Patreon is not just for gamers. No, apparently it's for Mark too, right? And okay. and they said, Gar said, Patreon is more than what you said, Mark. You're right. It is. It is. Okay. Okay, well, this will be the last one. We'll finish with this one. Score will be 437 if I include my spouse in the application. Okay? I guess that was a statement. Go for it. If you're in Canada, go for it. If you're outside Canada, it's likely that's probably not going to be high enough to get through. All right. Okay. Woo! What an unbelievable round. Alicia, you stuck through this. This is what I do. Like these endless Q&A periods. I'm gonna just flip over very quickly here, Alicia, and I'm gonna show the fine folks what we're talking about here. We've been hinting at this. You can see this little tool is a critical component as we have many tools in our course. So those of you who are interested, all you have to do is click on the link and it will take you here. And I want to show you guys something. When you go to the Canadian Immigration Institute right here, and I didn't put the link in the description below, but if you go to the Canadian Immigration Institute, just this morning, I decided, you know what? People don't know what's in our course. So I'm going to open up the first two modules. So the first two modules are completely a free trial. All you have to do is go in there, click on Get Free Access Now, and it will allow you. All you have to do is enter your email address and you can get right in and you'll see the first two modules. You'll get a sneak peek as to actually what's inside. You'll learn what Express Entry is all about, the comprehensive ranking system, which many of you Feb 13ers are well aware of, but you'll learn how to determine if you're eligible, all guided by yours truly. So go here, go to the Canadian Immigration Institute site and click on this and register for your free access. Those of you who don't want to wait and know, just like this crazy draw with everybody rushing, this course is going to fill up. And when it's full, the cart will close. I haven't looked at it to see where it's at right now, but all you have to do is click on here and the link in the description will take you right here to this site with a nice little video with my smiling face here talking all about it. You can go there, you can register. There's answers as to what the course contains. Although if you go and check out the free one, you'll get to see exactly what the first two modules are. And I just decided to open those up and they're great. There's a lot of cool stuff in there. And then you'll see if you scroll down, blah, 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 you know who I am. And then testimonials from some previous subscribers to my do-it-yourself course. So get over there, subscribe. There's also a link below where you can connect in and book a consult with the smart person in the firm, which is Alicia. And also the other lawyer in our firm, Susan, is available to help you guys as well. So that's all we've got for today. We hope that it was enjoyable. We hope that our sacrificing just about 2 hours, Alicia. 2 hours we've been going at this. You've been so patient. I feed off of this stuff, but boy, I had to subject Alicia to this. I said, I can't go on here and have them just listen to me blithering on. You have to come and join me. And it was good because she actually told you some good stuff that I probably would have glossed over. So thanks so much for watching. It was a pleasure to have you all with us. And we wish you all the best in your journey, especially you Feb 13ers. Take care.